Hey everybody!
Hello. How are you, Billy?
I'm not too bad, Toph. How you doing?
I'm doing quite well.
How's your weekend been?
Look, there was some wine last night, which I was aware of upon waking up this morning, but
Feeling a little bit groggy?
I've played through it,
And you got to the movies today.
and I got to the movies.
Did you have some popcorn to soak up the wine?
I sure didn't, because I don't like popcorn.
Yeah, see, that's messed up. Just another one of your opinions that is wrong.
Clearly.
I got to the movies twice this weekend, actually. Some of the feedback we've received on email is that people are a bit confused because they expect this podcast to be about movies with bears in them. So happy to inform, I went and saw Paddington 2.
Are we going to deep dive on Paddington? Or?
No. It was fine.
All right. But for the bear fans out there.
But yeah, just be aware, I saw it. There you go.
And if you're
grateful.
particularly into films with bears, just be aware that
it's out there. If
Paddington 2's
you
out
want to
there.
catch it.
Get amongst it.
So what we are going to deep dive into today, though, is The Disaster Artist.
The Disaster Artist.
Now, well, obviously, we're both big fans of The Room, as any decent human being should be.
Quite right.
Because it is a tremendous film in so many ways.
Yes, and we should probably address right at the top. It's impossible to talk about The Disaster Artist
Without talking about The Room.
without talking about
What
The
The
Room.
Disaster Artist is the true story of the making of The Room, which
Now-
is widely known as the worst film ever made.
Yes, now there are people out there, believe it or not, who don't know what The Room is.
Right. So should we go into The Room a little bit?
Let's
before we
briefly
start?
touch on The Room, which
All
is
right.
a film that was released in 2003.
Yep.
Written, produced, directed, and
starring.
starring one Tommy Wiseau.
That's right. Now, Tommy Wiseau claims to be from New Orleans. The truth is that nobody knows where he's from.
No one knows where he's from other than clearly not anywhere in the United States.
No, he's got a pretty outrageous Eastern European accent.
Even know.
The film cost a budget of just over $6 million, which he financed personally. Nobody knows exactly where that money came from.
It is a train wreck of a film.
It is in many, many ways.
A description I had heard of The Room before we saw it was that it is the Citizen Kane of bad films.
Yeah,
you
and I think
imagine
that's-
how bad a film can be.
Yeah.
The Room is it.
It's written by someone. It's almost as if he'd never seen a film. And so anyway, The Disaster Artist is the story of the making of that, and it's based on a book which is written by the lead actor, second lead actor in the film, apart from Tommy Wiseau, a man named Greg Sestero, and
Played in The Disaster Artist by
Dave Franco,
Dave Franco.
with Tommy Wiseau being played by James Franco. It's a very Franco-esque production, The Disaster Artist. It's directed by Franco. In some ways, this is, James Franco is to this as Tommy Wiseau was to The Room.
Yes.
This is just better. Now, you haven't read the book, have you? Even though I've been recommending it for years.
Yeah, well, you haven't read it either.
I've both read it and listened to it.
Oh, okay. I take it back.
I am a gigantic fan of this book. The day it came out in 2013, I was actually in the States, and I ran down to Barnes & Noble in New York, bought a hard copy of this book, read it twice that week, and I've since listened to it twice as well. It's one of my favourite books. So this, for me, is probably my most anticipated film of the last couple of years, even more than Star Wars. I've been anticipating this film ever since I read the book, even before the film was announced. So let's just dive in. Because I have such a kind of high expectation of this film, you start this, because I feel like my opinion is maybe going to be slightly off to yours. So you just dive right in, tell us.
Well, I was also massively looking forward to this film as someone who... I don't even know if it's right to call yourself a fan of The Room, because The Room has it does now have a massive following.
Giant following. In fact, what I found out today is that it's made its budget back.
Yeah.
It's actually managed to turn a profit, which for a $6 million... I know that it's been 15 years now, but for a $6 million film that is widely regarded as the worst film ever made, pretty impressive that it's turned a profit.
Yeah. Unlike Justice League.
Let's see how that does in 15 years.
So yeah, I was really looking forward to this as well.
Yeah.
Haven't read the book, but I've been told a lot about it by you on many occasions.
And also, I guess anyone who is familiar with The Room is at least somewhat familiar with how it was made. Whether or not you know every little story that happened, you're aware of Tommy Wiseau. And
well, yeah,
who
because the
he
credits
is,
start and every credit is Tommy Wiseau.
That's right. In fact, the film opens with 2 separate production logos for Wiseau Films.
Yeah.
Because he paid to have two made and couldn't decide which one he liked better.
Now, the very start of The Disaster Artist is we start with a bit of real life.
That's right.
Of a bunch of...
Which I was actually surprised by.
A bunch of famous faces, including Kristen Bell, Kevin Smith, Keegan-Michael Keyes, Adam Scott, J.J. Abrams, and there's more, just talking about the phenomenon that is...
The Room.
The Room.
Yeah.
And one thing that they bring up, and this has been brought up by several people, talking about The Room, which is this god-awful film.
Yeah.
Which people love.
Yeah.
And people are still talking about.
Yeah.
A decade and a half later.
Not many movies do that.
Yeah, so it does pose this... It's not a central part of The Disaster Artist, but it is a nice little tangential kind of thing that is The Room through... Not by design, but is The Room a great piece of art?
Which is... It's the very question that it poses. What is a bad movie? Because... there are some great movies that nobody ever sees. There are some bad movies that a lot of people sees. But this isn't even about how many people have seen it. This is about its longevity. The fact that people are still watching and talking and having fun with this film 15 years later.
And making a film about the making of the film.
Yeah.
It is a remarkable thing.
Yeah, it really is.
It draws in... So, there's those people, the famous faces at the beginning of the film. Even within the film, the amount of people who clearly were like, hell yeah, I'll be a part.
I want to be a part of this.
I want to be part of that. In the supporting cast, you've got Sharon Stone.
Yes.
Melanie Griffiths.
Yep.
Alison Brie.
Yep.
Zac Efron.
Who's great.
Megan Mullally.
Yep.
Hannibal Buress.
Yep.
Bob Odenkirk.
Yep.
Jackie Weaver for the Australians out there. She's fantastic, actually, as Lisa's mum.
Yep.
Like the amount... Bryan Cranston.
Bryan Cranston makes an appearance, and you've forgotten... Nathan Fielder.
I was very excited.
From Comedy Central's Nathan For You, which is one of my all-time favourite shows. He only makes a small part in this, but it just brought a little...
I was very excited.
A little smile to my face.
I was like, hey, Nathan For You's in this. Just the amount of people in the business who were just like, sign me up.
It's widely been regarded that anyone in Hollywood, particularly comedians, love The Room and love this film. And the amount of them who came out of the woodworks just to be a part of this, I think really shows that.
Yeah. And The Disaster Artist, is about how The Room came to be. It's actually a really personal story, though.
Which is my favourite part of the book, is that it's really... The book is kind of split between three stories. It's the story of Greg Sestero, who, as I said before, wrote the book and plays the part of Mark. And it actually starts 5 years before The Room was released. So it's actually the story of how he met Tommy and what was going on with his life at the time and how Tommy affected his life.
And actually, so they meet in an acting class in San Francisco. And our introduction to Tommy is him quite literally throwing himself around a stage.
You've heard the term chew the scenery. At one point I wouldn't be surprised if he actually put his mouth on some of the set.
From the very first time we meet him, it's this condensed little thing of what Tommy is.
Yes.
He is full throttle into this thing.
Yeah.
And it's terrible.
Yes, but Greg Sestero was very drawn to that because he saw something in Tommy that wasn't in himself, and that was this complete lack of fear and this ability to just get up there and do it. Just really drew him, and that's how that relationship started. They do a really great job of humanizing all of the characters. Greg and Tommy in particular, it would have been very easy to make this a slapstick comedy.
Yeah, James Franco's portrayal of Tommy could so easily have just fallen into like a caricature.
Because Tommy Wiseau almost is already a caricature.
Yeah.
So,
with the voice and the laugh and everything, it would be so easily to not be able to take that character seriously because we're so used. Particularly if you've seen The Room, it's so hard to take that person seriously.
Yes, but James Franco actually gave a fantastic performance. So he was my favourite performance in this. I was a little less overwhelmed with Dave Franco, which is weird because usually I quite like Dave Franco and I'm not. James Franco is a bit more hit and miss for me, but James Franco put in a great performance in this film.
He's actually amazing.
He really is, and He is one of those people that, for me, he's always been kind of a little bit of a joke in Hollywood, but I actually do believe that he is probably a very smart man. He obviously has a love of film, which is one of the big things about this. One of the key messages is just about how wonderful film as an art can be, even if it's terrible.
Yeah.
And I think that he was actually a pretty good choice to make this movie.
Now, with I don't know what it's like in the book, but in the film, and this is something that kind of doesn't quite work for me, is whose film is it? Is it Greg's film or is it Tommy's film?
Yeah. Now this, alright, I guess I'll get into some of it, because this for me was the largest departure from the actual story. There were about 3 kind of big changes. You know, there are little changes along the way, as always happens when you translate a book to film, because that just has to happen. You're condensing it down. There were a couple of big changes, and the big one for me was in Greg's character. So I don't know how much whether people listening to this have read the book or not, but Greg actually was starting to gain quite a career in Hollywood prior to The Room. He had a couple of bit parts, a couple of kind of lead roles, and he had actually one larger lead role in a film, and he was really starting to build a career, which I'm surprised they left out, because that really kind of drove Tommy's jealousy, which you see a little bit in this film, but it's mainly in the film geared towards Greg having a relationship with a girl. Yeah, and from reading the book, there is always this question of, well, how much are they using each other? You know, like, how much are they actually friends? And is Greg Sestero really just in this, you know, to kind of, he's living in Tommy's apartment rent-free, he's getting paid to act in this movie, and, you know, so even though Greg's a great character, it does kind of add a little bit more depth to it. So I was a bit sad to see that change.
Because, like, in the movie, you're aware that Tommy has money. He's financing the movie himself.
And not just financing, he bought all of the equipment, bought 2 entire sets of equipment, not renting any of it.
Yeah, which no one does.
Nobody does.
Like, Kubrick owned his own lenses, but...
I mean, Michael Bay owns his own red camera.
I don't want to know what Michael Bay does with that. I do love the fact that the film itself kind of throws up and feeds into the myth of Tommy. Like, there's no answers to who this guy is.
Yes, yeah.
How is he in a position to be... How does he afford these things? What has he done? Where did his money come from?
Yeah.
A couple of times in the movie, you know, casting people like Bob Odenkirk's character.
Yes.
He's saying, you know, you're the only kind of character you can play is a villain.
Yep.
You could be like Dracula or something.
Or a Frankenstein monster.
And Dracula comes up a couple of times.
Yes.
Is Tommy Wiseau a vampire?
Well, I mean, that's always been a theory, because...
Because he fucking looks like one.
Well, and in the book too, Greg, because obviously the book is a lot longer, there's a lot more detail. Greg goes into, he would come home and Tommy would be hanging from a bar over the door.
Like Michael
from
Keaton in Batman.
Yes. And when he first wrote the script for The Room, he did actually throw out there, which I think does come up in the movie at some point. Oh, and also maybe Johnny Vampire.
Yeah.
He never really decided on that.
The way the film works is as Greg's story.
Yes.
Particularly at the end of the film, then.
Yes.
You do really kind of veer more to Tommy.
Yeah.
But then you veer back, and it doesn't totally work for me.
I was exactly the same. When we left the theatre, my wife said, I feel like they got a little bit too heavy with The Room. And by the end, she kind of left kind of thinking, like, did I just watch The Room? Like... You know, instead of watching this separate film about the making of it, there are a lot of elements for it that really worked for me, but it just wasn't... I agree that I feel like they got they veered away from what the story was, I think.
And it would be... Like, I can totally understand the temptation, because they shot... I think I read...
20 minutes. Is that what you were about to say? That they shot 20 minutes of shot-for-shot
of
remake of The Room?
Yeah. And I can totally understand the temptation to do that. You just be like, how fun would it be to just...
Yeah.
Like, here we are, let's put on a show.
Yeah.
We can just do The Room for ourselves.
Yeah. And actually, some of that was used really well. So the book ends at the start of the premiere. The lights go down, the movie starts, he looks at Tommy's face and he sees how happy he is that he's finally, you know, made it in Tommy's eyes, and that's where the book ends. The film takes this an extra 15 minutes and it goes through what happens when that movie plays, and the entire audience laughing and Tommy starting to cry. and Greg talking to him, and because it has always been, ever since the release, Tommy has very firmly said it's a black comedy. He won't admit that he was trying to make a serious movie.
Everyone knows that that's not the case.
Yeah, everyone knows it's the case. But this film kind of explains that was Greg talking to him and saying, look, these people are still loving it. You just need to embrace it.
They don't love it for the reasons you wanted them to love it.
But they still do love it. So you just need to accept that and embrace it. And that was one part of the film that did work for me. I really liked seeing that, because as nice as the ending in the book was, it was also nice to, again, kind of humanize Tommy a little bit more and go, hey, this is still a person. He was still trying to, it might have been weird, but it was his story.
And because in the film, like as he's portrayed in the film at any rate, he can be a really average person.
Yes.
But he's also, like, you really feel with the guy, because he's obviously, in some ways insecure, in some ways misguided. And like the way Franco plays him, he's so human, that you can't help but feel for him, even though there's plenty of times in the film where you're like, you dick.
Yeah, and he can
his behaviour on set is appalling.
Yeah, see, and obviously, again, like, we're talking about a much longer book condensed down. Like, that was just a small taste of the kind of stuff that went on set. Like, he was consistently late every day. He actually fired 2 entire sets of crews. Whereas in the film, it's kind of hinted that he fired one, but right towards the end of production anyway. Whereas he actually went through 2 entire sets.
It's really good, actually. In the film, the relationship between Tommy and the script supervisor, played by Seth Rogen, and the director of photography.
Yes,
and because those kind of guys, because Tommy doesn't know what he's doing, it kind of winds up being on those guys.
Yes,
to make this film.
I mean,
when they're standing there going, "What is this trash?"
Yeah, Sandy, the Seth Rogen character, who's the script supervisor, he apparently directed most of the room, and he will not want to admit that. And apparently, I can't even remember whether he actually even got a credit as script supervisor because of the whole falling out. So it might not even be on his resume, which he's probably happy about.
Probably
but
pretty alright with that.
He apparently basically directed this film.
And the look on Seth Rogen's face during all the scenes where they're shooting is priceless.
He was wonderful.
Just this look of what is fucking happening here.
I know that we tend to say this almost every week these days, but the performances in this film were great. The only one I wasn't really thrilled with was Dave Franco. How did you feel about Dave Franco?
I thought Dave Franco was good, because not great, but good. Because, he's playing he didn't, you could resisting the temptation to make Greg a genuine hero.
Yeah,
Greg's in the film a kind of pathetic character sometimes.
Yeah, yep. Which, as I said, comes up in the book, where there is always that question of, what are Greg's motives? Obviously it's written from his point of view, so you do kind of side with him, but at the same time, he doesn't ever say, look, I wasn't a dick. Yeah. But the kind of pathetic as an actor thing, that was one big change for me, that I was like, that's not really who Greg was. And it was a change for me that I kind of understand why they did it, because it kind of helped you understand why he was drawn to Tommy. But, I feel like that could have been done a little truer to the story.
I think this is an important question for this film.
Yeah.
Do you think the disaster artist works? And this is going to be hard for us to answer. But does the disaster artist work if you haven't seen The Room? Is this a film that works by itself, or is it just a really cool companion piece to something that you already love?
I'm going to go out there and say it 100% does not work if you haven't seen The Room. And I think that's the biggest shame in this movie, is that I have been recommending the book to anyone and everyone, whether you've seen the movie or not, because it is a great story. And like I said, it's about Greg. The disaster artist, I feel, did lean too much towards The Room, and they try to give you as much kind of backstory as they can, but I do feel that without having seen The Room, you are missing quite a large chunk of the comedy in this film.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And impossible for us to say,
because we've seen The Room many times,
how much you could enjoy this film if you haven't seen it. But for me, I wanted to absolutely love this film, and I wanted it to be an absolutely brilliant bit of work.
I was expecting this to make my top 5 of
by
the
itself,
year, and it won't.
And in the end, I really, really enjoyed it as an add-on.
Yes.
To The Room.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't dislike it by any stretch.
No,
I mean, I
there's-
like
there's
this
lots of
film.
good things
I
about
like
it.
this film.
Yeah.
But for me, its best quality is as an add-on to something
Yeah.
I've already got.
Like, for example, how many people were in your cinema when you saw it today?
Probably 20.
Right, that's more than mine. There were 3 other people in my cinema, and we're talking 2 days after opening. I think that shows that, yeah, without prior knowledge of the room, I don't think there's many people rushing out to see this movie.
Have you rated the film?
I've been tossing it up in my mind. Originally, I was thinking a 7. I'm swinging between a 7 and a 6, which makes me really sad. I want to give it a 7, and I wanted to give it a 10. I really wanted to. But I just think that I think its biggest flaw, as we've just said, is that it doesn't really work as a movie on its own, which I think, given the source material, it very much could have. So for me, I haven't actually gone into the IMDb app yet, but I'll probably end up around a 6.
I'm between a 6 or a 7. We're, again, disappointingly on the same page.
Yeah.
I mean, I might wind up being a 7 because I did really enjoy it, but in the knowledge that so much of that enjoyment is not of the film's doing.
Yes.
But then again, the film is made for people that have seen The Room. So
yeah.
I am its target audience,
Yeah.
and it knows I've seen it, so if it's leaning on that, yeah, I'm largely okay with that. I just wouldn't recommend it to someone who hasn't seen The Room.
If you haven't seen The Room, go see The Room.
Absolutely.
Because
Go throw some spoons.
so what I'm really saying is this film is for everybody. The problem is that not everybody's seen The Room yet.
And that is a problem.
So I guess that's it from us. So if you liked this, give us a rating on iTunes. Feel free to tell everybody you know. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all that shit. And we'll catch you next time.
See you, everyone.